to edition 92 of all Killa No Filla podcasts with me, Rachel Fairburn and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we have a mutual interest in serial killers. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
This is, I'll say, a horrible episode. Heads up.
It is, and I'm in a bad mood already anyway. She's going to send me fucking under, innit?
It was your Tim's suggestion, mate.
Yeah, well, whatever. It was Tim's suggestion. As I said, this came in through the back door. Don't make any jokes.
Do you think maybe that's what Tim has been doing? Because didn't he listen to the podcast?
He does
before
listen
you got
to the podcast,
together.
Yeah.
So maybe he's playing the long game that he's like, I just really want them to cover Gordon Northcott. So if I go out with her for half a decade, she might eventually listen if I keep chipping away at her.
Do you know what? Fine, go. I am. I'll tell you what. I am ready. Obviously, Tim, if you listen to this, not you. I'm ready to get rid of people in my life now. It's too many.
Yeah.
Oh my God, useless cunts. Fuck off.
What's your limit then?
3.
Okay. Well, that would be your mum.
You, Tim, my mum, my Auntie Trish.
Well, that's 4 already.
That's
so
fine.
It looks like Tim and I are going to have to fight to the death.
Listen, I've said you. You're in. Oh, yeah, I forgot about Tim. Look, anyway, the point is, I just have reached a stage. It's my birthday this week, so I'm really fucked off as well. I've just reached a stage where I'm like, what is the point in this? In inverted commas, friendship. I don't understand what this is. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes when you go, why is this a thing? I know this sounds really harsh, but you get to a point where you go, nah, don't you?
Yes, actually, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about, where you're sort of like, what is anyone getting out of this? And aren't we just sort of staying friends because we think that's what we should do?
Yes, exactly. And especially like, I get a bit weird about things around my birthday anyway. I get a bit narky about stuff. But I was just totaling up stuff that I've done throughout my life for other people. And I'm like...
Why were you doing that?
Because do you know what? Because I tell you, this is right, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say this. I've got a bit of a cold and I'm feeling sorry for myself. I think I'm underappreciated in the world. And yeah, I think sometimes that I'm like, oh, I did that for you. I came there for that. Oh, has anyone been to visit me in London? No, they haven't. You just get to the point where you go, I'm a bit sick of being reliable. I'm going to start being unreliable. See how that works out for me.
I can't wait.
I'm telling you. You'll still get the reliability. Some people it's going to be reserved, the unreliability for certain people. I'm going to enjoy doing it.
Yeah, oh, what, being flaky in return?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I am. This is a new me. Well, it's dawning. It's the unreliable era. Listen, it's time for change. The Queen's dead. I'm making some changes around here.
New leader, new regime.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry if you're finding out from us that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died.
Well, if they are finding out, what the fuck have they been doing? She's been dead. Since Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. 6 days now. The woman will be in a state of decomposition of some description. So for 6 days, if you've just found out from me, what do you do with your life? Do you live underground?
You're going to get someone tweeting, oh, spoilers.
Oh, here's something. I tweeted on... So the news broke here. It was like, the Queen's not well. Fine. It's obviously very much like Tim the Queen having to tell us every little ailment she's got. So I was like, all right. But I was just, it's a normal day. I'm working. So I tweeted from the old Killer account. If anyone's got any ideas for merch, head over to the Facebook page. And this annoyed me. Somebody put, oh, brutal. I'm like, I don't know what these people are talking about.
Yeah, I saw that. Wrote, I don't know what that means.
And then somebody wrote, oh, if I know all Killer fans, I'm heading over there right now because of the news. Well, first of all, it was nothing to do with the Queen being ill or dying.
Right.
It is a normal day and you are allowed to tweet. Secondly, I hate that attitude of crassness around death. In particular, it says doing this podcast. If news like that breaks, it's like not everything's related to that. And also, if anyone had made a joke about it. I'm not a royalist or anything, but people don't. I don't look. People just get on my fucking nerves.
I remember you messaging me on the day, going, "What's just happened?" You're like, "I've nipped to Lidl and I've come back and Hugh's got a black tie on."
Yeah. Well, I went to, because obviously I've been obsessed with this for years. The Queen Down. I read that article, London Bridges Down. I read that several times a year. So I was like, oh, when the Queen dies, it's going to be quite interesting to see all this pomp and circumstance. So I had to go to Lidl. I didn't go to the gym because I thought, you can't have your phone with you. Went to Lidl and I said to Tim before I left, if the Queen dies when I've gone, do not mention it in any WhatsApp groups. Do not tell me. I do not want to find out like that. I want to find out in my own way. So I came back and he's playing on his PlayStation, the incel machine. And he's got his earphones on. And he went, is she? I went, don't you fucking dare. Don't you fucking dare. And then he went, and then he told me, so one of his mates had said, and then he told me. So then I put the iPad on, because heaven forfend I should be able to watch my own television. Put my iPad on, and Hugh Edwards, the newsreader, said, the King. And I went, oh, bloody hell, here we go. We're off.
Wow.
But I knew it was serious when they drafted Hugh Edwards in.
Yeah.
When you get the...
Because also hadn't he not slept because he did the Liz Truss thing and then was about to clock off. And then they were like, Hugh, we've got a black tie, get back on the telly.
Oh, God. I bet he was like, what now? I think news, though, we've had coronavirus, we've had all the political things, we've had the Queen dying, we've got the war of Ukraine and Russia. No more news now.
Yeah. Yeah, done with news.
Seriously, do you know what? I think it's having a detrimental effect on my mental health,
Well, there is loads of theories about that, about people who are too engaged in current affairs. Like, they can't actually make that meaningful change from home. So it just leaves you feeling sort of like burnt out and helpless. We're not meant to have this much information all the time.
No, it's terrible. In fact, I made a decision. I don't think I'm going to keep Twitter. I think I'm just going to use that to post, here's where I'm gigging. And I don't want engagement with anybody. And I think I'm going to have to watch the news twice a day like we used to in the old days. Morning and evening.
Yeah.
And, the rest of it, I think. Anyway, I think a bit of murder will take the edge off this mood.
This is, this is one of the worst ones. This is Albert Fishbad, isn't it?
I think it's worse. In fact, I didn't really know much about this, and with reading about it, it makes me feel actually physically sick. It's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got a sort of side avenue of cases to talk about that relate to this that are just as fucking horrible. So if you're feeling a bit queasy or a bit like you want a light-hearted romp, it's not that.
No, this is heavy going. This is the Wineville chicken coop murders. Wineville in California, so-called Wineville, because it had lots of vineyards. It was a very nice place, very quiet. It actually changed its name after these murders were uncovered. It changed its name to Miraloma. I mean, how bad is that? Something you've got to change your name.
I know, yeah.
to it.
There's a few comedians who've done that, though. They've had to outrun bad stories about themselves, so they've changed their name.
Oh, God.
But also, it's amazing who hasn't had to do that, considering their past behaviour.
Well, isn't it just? This all happened between 1926 and 1928, and our killer's name is Gordon Stewart Northcott. We're going to call him Stewart because that's what everyone called him. It's easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll just call him Stewart. There's probably murders we don't know about, I would say.
Well, yeah, he confesses to a load later on that they can't really prove if he did or not. So he confesses to up to 20 murders. But
Blimey.
Yeah, we only know about a few.
He was born on the 9th of November 1906 in Canada, in Saskatchewan. In Canada, his mother Louise and his father George. He had a sister called Winifred who was, I think, 17 years older than him. Quite a lot older. Louise and George also had another son called Willie who was 6 years old. But sadly, Willie died when he was 6 because he had pneumonia. Now, Louise, as you would expect, the mother took this incredibly badly. She was described as a domineering woman. And, let's be fair, what did you say about this case?
Right, well, I did a whole 180 of... The first thing I read was like, you know, it was the mum's fault. She was she was overbearing. She dressed him as a girl. And straight away I was like, oh, why don't you just fuck off? Leave the mother alone. And then I read the case and I was like, no, string her up. She's not just like... implicated in this. She is a huge facilitator of everything that happens.
Well, when Willie dies, Louise was heartbroken. She was described as domineering anyway, but her anger and dominance became worse. She became quite violent. She was in a lot of pain, obviously, and was lashing out at her family. She then discovered she was pregnant, and you'd think, oh, that she'd be happy, but no, she was livid. She did not want this child, which was Stewart, as it turns out. She did everything she could to sort of trigger ending the pregnancy. In home remedies, she even over-exercised to the point of collapsing. Now, George and Louise had a bit of a violent relationship at this point. It got so bad, oh, this is awful, that George actually kicked her in the stomach when she was pregnant. However, George Stewart Northcott is determined to be born, and he is born on the 9th of November. Now, Louise didn't want him, but she did the basics. She fed him. She kept him warm. She made sure that, you know, he stayed alive. But then she does a complete U-turn.
Yeah.
She becomes obsessed with him.
Yeah, dotes on him, facilitates him. The child grows up to be incredibly spoilt, to the point where his father, after his capture, spoiler alert, says that child wasn't just spoilt, he was ruined. Now, I want to talk about...
I've got mates with dogs like that. Can't stand spoilt dogs. It ruins them, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah. What you want to do is break their back and put them in a wheelchair, and then they're good.
Then they'll realise how lucky they really are.
And sometimes at night I whisper him, I'll come for the other two legs as well, if you don't behave yourself. Obviously not. I dote on my dog, and my whole lifestyle is built around facilitating this absolute little slug.
Oh, don't.
I just want to say, he has a sort of like very spoilt childhood, gets the best of everything that he wants. When he gets captured, he will make some claims, and his mum will make some wild claims about all sorts of things. He claims that his father raped him from the age of 10. Mm-hmm. His mother will claim that he is actually first she says he's the illegitimate son of an English nobleman.
Oh, give up, love.
And then she says, give up, love, fucking hell. Then she says that she's actually Gordon's grandma, and that he was a result of Winifred, his sister, and the father, Arthur, having a child that was a product of incest. And then she said that's why he behaved the way that he did. It's out of his control. It's a mental defect because he's a product of incest.
She's telling lies.
Yes.
We know you were pregnant with him. You're a fucking liar.
Yeah, and she also said that Gordon was sexually abused by the whole family. So she comes out with some absolutely wild stuff.
Do you know what? We've got a sea of nutters.
That's a very progressive language.
Look, I couldn't give a fuck. This is set in 1920-odd. It is progressive for the time that it is.
A sea of nutters. Fucking hell.
A sea of nutters. George and Winifred are actually relieved that she becomes obsessed with Stewart, because they're like, oh, thank God the pressure's off. Like, she's not being awful to us. Mm-hmm. We can go with this. This is fine. Winifred becomes obsessed with him as well.
Mm-hmm. He basically has two mums. She sort of dotes on him and just facilitates his every whim.
And George is very much in the background, just nodding and going, yeah, no problem, okay.
Oh, shit, I called him Arthur earlier. I meant George.
Yeah, George, Arthur, whatever. Look, old men in the 20s are all the fucking same to me. Louise, there was a rumour that went around that Louise used to dress Stewart as a girl. Now, this wasn't true. The rumour started because as Stewart got older, he was a very effeminate, flamboyant young man. He used to wear fancy clothes, he had a very high voice. This made some people uncomfortable, but some people really liked it and treated him like a local celebrity.
Yeah.
So whereas some people referred to him as an oddball, some people absolutely loved him. And he loved any attention, good or bad.
Yes.
So everything suited him.
The whole thing about him being dressed in women's clothes or girls' clothes is just, I think, quite a regressive period trying to make sense of some senseless murders. And so they're going...
It's just gossip, innit?
It is gossip.
It's one of those things. Somebody had probably said when all this came out, oh, well, you know, she used to dress him as a girl. That's where this all went wrong.
Yeah.
That'll be...
And then they'll all claim that they're the ones who came up with that theory. Like, you know, old comics who claim that they came up with various different, like, stock put-downs.
Oh, God, yeah.
Someone once said that so when you go... When you go watch live comedy, sometimes people go as a way, especially if they're comparing, but a way into some material. Give us a cheer if you're drinking, and sometimes you do it as a compare to sort of get everyone together.
Yeah.
And someone claimed that they invented that.
Well, give us a cheer if you're drinking.
Yeah, which is like saying, yeah. Did you know that I invented the saying? We're gonna have a short break now, but we'll be back with more acts. Give it up for the facts in the first section. I actually invented.
Do you know what I invented? Welcome to. That's what I invented. Seriously, who said they invented that?
It's either...
Oh, get out of my fucking life.
Or... But I think it's...
That has got the first one written all over it.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
He also said he came up with where did you learn to whisper in a helicopter?
No, of course he didn't. I mean, why would you want to be known that you made that up?
Well, I don't know if it's a status thing or I was the first person to be witty about this thing and now everyone sort of aped it. I don't know what it is.
Do you remember at Baby Blue, a club that used to exist in Liverpool, which was my least favourite of all the clubs? Do you remember that awful intro that they started playing?
No.
So this club, I never enjoyed myself there. It was always a constant battle. You always felt like you were just above water. And they started playing, it got taken over by this guy, and he had this special intro done. So, you know, like clubs have, like if you're at the Frog and Bucket in Manchester, you know the playlist. You know when you hear...
Glee have it as well.
What was that?
The Glee have like a special run-in.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like the Glee's sort of announcement is great, but also the Glee's grand music is too much for what you're going to do, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, because it's like it's like Crystal Maze or something, and you're like,
it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, isn't it?
Yeah. I was like, I can't possibly follow this.
You just walk on and go, hello. It's like when clubs play like AC/DC, Back in Black, and you're like, it's just a woman talking. I can't live up to this. Anyway, my point is, this club in Liverpool, the guy had this, like, pre-recorded thing, and it was horrendous. So it'd be like, oh, here's a song. Now, he insisted it was played. I can't believe you never heard this. So it'd play just before the compare went on. But it wasn't music. It was just talking. But it was comedy catchphrases.
What?
So it'd be like clips of comedy, and then it'd just go, garlic bread, and then other... like comedy catchphrases, none of which I can think.
Oh, like going out. Oh, we've all got a man draw.
Yeah, so it'd be like going out, and like garlic bread. It was.
Oh my god,
fucking awful.
Because then it's like, oh, remember all those comedians with iconic bits? You're about to see some that don't have any.
100%. But also, it didn't work as a thing because people were confused by what was going on.
That's so funny.
It didn't sound like it was part of a show. It just was like, who's played a mental what is this? And you'd be looking at the audience and they're looking at each other. And do you know what? I'm going to make it my mission to try and find that, because it was a madness that should never have happened.
I don't remember that. That's incredible.
Oh, I can't believe you don't remember that.
How do we start talking about this?
I have no idea. Anyway, the point is, Louise was obsessed with her son.
Yes.
She would do anything for him, as we will find out. Now, George was the only one who tried to discipline him, and when he did, he was completely overruled. So he just gave up. I think he was just like, do you know what? Let them get on with it. He was a very talented pianist, Stewart. He got to such a level that he was able, as a teenager, to play in bars and be paid for it. Loved classical music. He had great chat. He was quite charismatic. He was described as unusual and dramatic. I'd like to be described as usual and calm.
I feel like unusual and dramatic is code for gay at that time.
He's unusual and dramatic.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
And I heard that his mum used to dress him up as a girl. All of this is feels like quite homophobic edge to it.
I mean, anything does if you say it in the right way. He plays the piano. His mother's very fond of him.
He's the product of incest.
Yeah, he's got a very quiet father. So, what he does in his later teens, he's got a car, he's driving around, he starts picking up adolescent boys. At this point as well, he's also known for something else, his excessive body hair.
Yeah, this is really weird sort of detail to have in the story, but apparently, yeah, he was very good looking. He was sort of described as a dandy, loved fashion, loved clothes, but he was also, everyone was like, he's weirdly hairy, right? Hirsute, I believe the phrase is.
Oh.
And it's one of those words that I always forget, and I don't actually confidently know how to say it, but I think it's like hairsuit, even though it's spelled HARSUITE, something like that.
Oh.
Yeah, it means really hairy.
Oh. I bet someone's referred to me as that in the past.
You always say this, but there's not a hair on your body, mate.
It's constant battle. I honestly, though, I'm not as hairy as I used to be. And I don't know why that is. I mean, not that I'm bothered.
Is it the estrogen leaving your body and with it your body hair?
All right, mate, it's my fucking birthday this week. Turn it in.
What? I don't understand why you get so wound up about your body. Not your body, your birthday.
Birthday? I don't know. Do you know what? It makes me cross.
What?
I'm so angry about it. I don't know why.
Rachel, ageing is a privilege.
Is it? I'm tired of it. It's boring. Yeah, I'm not as hairy as you speak, but this is the thing. I tell you what I've noticed a lot now, and I really like this. A lot of younger women are not removing their body hair, and I like this now.
Oh, do
I see
you?
quite a lot of women with hairy legs.
Yeah.
And I like it. I think good for you.
I think hairy pits look good.
Yeah, I think they look cool.
I just think that...
I like it.
I think I've spoken about this before, but, I do think that having hairy pits is sort of the preserve of, the naturally luminous and thin people that come from money, and so they get to be sort of... I talk about this a bit in my show, a bit androgynous and cute, and whereas
I'm bohemian.
Yeah, and my armpits, would look... Well, something that you'd sort of find hanging over the side of a door of an HGV lorry. So it's it's not my thing to experiment with, I think.
Oh dear, that's having said that though, I just couldn't be bothered. I remember the only time someone tried to bully me when I was at school was because I had hairy legs, and I was just like, right, and I found that was quite a good approach. Donna Rowlands, that was the girl's name.
So interesting. What's she ingesting from home to want to do that to another girl? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember going, oh, look at your hairy legs. Oh, you've got legs like Ryan Giggs. And I just was like, right, and? And I found that was the best way to deal with anyone who attempted to... Because it's like you can't come back, you can't say anything to that, can you?
Yeah. Rachel
Right?
Fairburn,
Yeah.
unbullyable.
Unbelievable. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure if I found out some of the things that people say about me in WhatsApp groups, I would crumble.
Oh, God, yeah.
But...
It's just...
Well, as I said, I don't want to meet anybody anymore. I am... the circle is getting smaller. I don't want to speak to anyone anymore. You know, I might become a monk.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why not a nun?
That's a good question. Maybe I feel more masculine. I think monks are a bit more fun. They do stuff, don't they? Like they make honey and do gardening. So I might... Oh, actually, sorry, what I mean is I'm going to become a later life lesbian.
That's what you want.
I always get those two mixed up. Anyway, where were we? Excessive body hair.
That was it. That's how we started.
Now, in August 1924, he's 18 years old, Stuart, and they moved from Canada to Los Angeles. There's more jobs there. Stuart enjoys living there. He's eccentric. It's welcome in Los Angeles. Tinseltown. He becomes a car salesman. He also played piano in the evening in various bars. So this was a good move for him. He feels more accepted, more able to be himself. He makes a friend. called Claude Scott. I like the name Claude.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, the Scott family loved him. It reminds me very much of that documentary that, you know, the Netflix one with the dad.
Stranger Next Door?
The Stranger Next Door, I think it's called. You'll know the one. The bit in the car, you'll know the bit. Where
The dad sucks them off.
Yeah, that's it. Where the entire family are groomed by a man. Now, this is what's happening. Because what happens is, as friendly as he is with Claude and as welcoming the family he is, he's actually very attracted to Claude's brother, Philip, who's referred to as Filla. He's 10 years old. Now, he spends a lot of time with the family. And what happens is Stewart, he starts to sexually assault Filla. Now, Philly doesn't say anything because obviously he's 10 years old. He's probably been told not to say anything. And he's probably completely baffled, confused and upset by the whole scenario. Now,
yeah, and this is a common thing that abusers do, apparently. They will see a child and then target the whole family and groom them all. And they basically, the phrase is seduce the whole family. So if the child does speak out, it won't be believed anyway. And the child feels less able to speak out because said adult is so sort of revered within their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, he says he has feelings for Philly and he gets obsessed with him. He plays his favourite song on the piano all the time. He even keeps a chair that Philly makes. What 10-year-old boy is making a chair?
Yeah, that's bizarre.
It's weird, isn't it? Now, the Scott family find out. They intervene, and on July 25th, 1925, Stewart is charged with statutory rape. Now, he never went to court because we're not sure what happened. Either the charges were dropped or an agreement was reached, so we don't know what happened there. Maybe they thought it was too much to put Philly through a trial. Maybe it's because of the nature of the crimes. They might have been frightened about what people would say. Who knows?
I also think I wouldn't be surprised if Stewart's family got involved and sort of mediated and were like, let's make this go away, because that would also explain why later on, when Stewart's committing crimes, he sort of feels like he can go to his family for support and they'll sort of they'll deliver.
Now, in August to October 1925, Stewart isn't thinking, oh, I've done a bad thing there and I've got away with something, maybe I should change my ways. He's not thinking that. He's actually seeing this as a breakup and he's heartbroken because he can't see Philly anymore. Now, he gets a job at Ralph's grocery store. And there's a young boy there called Walter Collins, who was a regular customer of the shop. The manager of the veg section, which again sounds like a euphemism from that time. He's the manager of the veg section, if you catch my drift. Oh, yes.
When I look back at all the boyfriends I had in high school, they've all ended up being managers of veg sections.
The manager of the veg section, who we don't have any other name, he actually noticed that Stewart was clearly interested in Walter. Now, Stewart at this point is soliciting sex with young boys as well. A neighbour of his had actually seen him with a prepubescent boy who was...
That they describe in every source as a sex worker.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you have a oldest 12-year-old boy being a sex worker? Like, that feels like the wrong... I know, obviously, and we do use the term sex worker, but, like, that seems like an abused, trafficked child.
Yeah, that's
not
exactly...
Like,
that's exactly
the phrase
what that
sex
is.
worker deliberately has a sense of empowerment about it, and just because they engage in sex work, I wouldn't say it actually makes them a sex worker, but I don't know the politics around that, so maybe I shouldn't be weighing in.
But I just think what we've got there is an abused child.
Yeah.
Now, because being gay was illegal at the time, a lot of people were like, well, that's gay business, I'm going to look the other way, I'm not getting involved. Very much the Dennis Nilsson, Jeffrey Dahmer vibe, isn't it? Well, that's gay business. So nobody intervenes, nobody says anything. He has a friend, another friend. He's got two friends. He had a friend called Dr. Ernest Tracy, and the doctor is like, oh, Stuart's a nice guy. Wish he'd stop asking me about death all the time, though.
Yeah.
He thinks, oh, this young man's got a natural curiosity. Perhaps he wants to be a doctor. One day, though, Stuart asks him, how do you get rid of a dead body? And he's like, well, quicklime quite effective. And this catches Dr. Ernest Tracy off guard. He starts to think, hang on a minute, this is very weird. Now I've told him how to dispose of a body. He doesn't visit me anymore. So he's obviously groomed this doctor for information.
Yeah. And also the fact that, like, I kept thinking about it in the car. I was like, if I wanted to find out how do you dispose of a body, I wouldn't just ask. I'd be like, what do hospitals do with the body parts and things like that? They can't just... What, do they burn them? And does that get rid of them, or is it just piles of... But you wouldn't just go, by the way, if you want to get rid of that body, how do you do that? Like, hide it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, create a bit of theatre around why you're asking.
Yeah, but I think that he's so spoiled and gets exactly what he wants. It doesn't ever occur to him at any point that he's going to get caught. He thinks, if we get rid of the body, that's fine. It's, and it'll take care of itself. That's what I really think.
Ugh, God, it's so depressing. It's going to get worse, this as well, because in 1926, when Stuart's 19, what does every 19-year-old boy want? A chicken farm. He goes to his dad, George, and he says, look, I've had an idea. I think I want some land, and I want to start a chicken farm, which instantly makes me feel physically sick, because it must stink.
Yeah. I think that's my theory, is that's why he went for a chicken farm. Because it's not as labour intensive as like farming sheep or cattle, and it smells bad all the time, especially in heat. This is a valley that grows wine, so no one would smell anything like bodies or lots of blood or anything like that.
God, it's actually making me feel fucking sick.
You okay?
They go to Wineville. They go to Wineville, George and Stuart. That's where they get the land. Now, they get the land, it's in the middle of nowhere. This is what he wanted. It's miles from the nearest neighbours. Now, this is hard work. They have to build the farm. They have to make the farm. So they decide to go to Winifred, who is 37 at this point, and she's got a son called Sanford. Now, he's 13 years old. They go to visit Winifred, and they say, can we take Sanford with us to help us build this farm? Can he come and live with Stuart to help on the farm? Stuart will enrol him in school, make sure he gets a good education. This will be a good opportunity for him. Now, Sanford is like, I don't want to do this, because I don't like Uncle Stuart, because he stands near me very closely and he makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sanford's sister, Jessie, she's very close to Sanford, he has to be more or less prized away from Jessie, because he's like, I really don't want to go. But unfortunately, he's forced to go to the ranch, as Stuart called it. They get to the land. George, Sanford and Stuart, they build a cottage. They make a garage. They have 6 hen houses and a goat house. The only luxury that was there was Stuart's piano. And as soon as all the building's done, George is like, well, it's done now, so I'm leaving. And Stuart is left alone with Sanford, and Sanford's like, I don't like this. This is bad. So on the first night after George left, Sanford's been sleeping on the sofa all this time. He's made to make dinner for Stuart, and this is what happens. Stuart eats dinner, and whatever's left over, Sanford can have. He can have the scraps. Stuart says to Sanford, by the way, you've been sleeping on the sofa all this time. You can sleep in the bed tonight. Now Sanford's like, I don't like this. Something bad is going to happen. He goes into the bedroom, he tries to sleep. He falls asleep eventually, and he's woken by Stuart's breath on his neck, and he's assaulted by him sexually. Now, he's assaulted at least 3 times a week by Stuart at this point.
Fucking hell.
He told Sanford that nobody would believe him, and he said, if others know about this, you'll go to prison.
Oh God, it's so dark. There's also some, I've got so many questions, because his dad, Stuart's dad, George, was there, and apparently George would eat and Stuart would eat, and then Sanford would eat the scraps. Ugh. So it's like, so George was involved in this, treating of a child very badly. And also, because Sanford had come from Canada, they had brought him over the border illegally. So he felt like he couldn't speak to the police, because technically he's an illegal immigrant. And a lot was, obviously when you're a kid, a lot is made of that. And don't do anything to draw attention to yourself. So he thinks, best case scenario, if I go and tell someone, they believe me, and I get put in prison for being an illegal immigrant. So he was just in this horrible, horrible situation. Also, there was no buses. There were miles from anywhere. He couldn't escape. And Stuart didn't, he kept him so busy with work, he didn't really have, like, time to think or try an escape plan, which is just so horrible. This poor kid must have just been like, this is my life now.
Like, of course, Stewart didn't enrol him in school. He just has him working on a farm, and he starts beating him. He starts punching him. He pours boiling water on his back when he's asleep. I actually burnt myself yesterday. I mean, it's not as bad as that, but I tell you it did. The toaster, I forgot the toaster had been on, and I grabbed the toaster to move it, and I grabbed the hot wire of the toaster.
Oh, shit.
So I'm in quite a bit of pain. Not that anyone gave me any sympathy for it, but, you know.
Of course not. You're expected to battle on, aren't you, Rachel?
Exactly. Now, Sanford actually learned how to minimise the attacks. He discovered that if he screamed loudly when Stewart attacked him, he stopped. He was also made to hit Stewart. He's like, come on, hit me. And then he'd beat him up. It's horrible.
Do you know the screaming thing? Because they didn't have neighbours, but I think in an area like that, the sound would carry. So I do think that Stewart was aware.
Well, this is interesting because neighbours did notice. They knew what was happening. Now, people, even though the nearest neighbours were a couple of miles away, people actually moved because of Stewart, because he was so horrible. People were like, that guy's weird, we're moving.
Well, in fact, it was a neighbour complaining. He fell out with a neighbour, went to the police. Stewart one day goes to the attorney's office and says, I want to make a complaint about my neighbour because they have profane and violent behaviour. And it's upsetting my nephew because he's training for the priesthood. And he's doing that by tending to chickens. Wow. So they do an investigation and they go to the neighbours. The neighbours go, listen, before you even start with us, you need to find out what's going on that ranch over there. In fact, they said find out what goes on because they'd seen Stewart openly beating Sanford in the street and on the farm. And they were like, you don't need to be looking here. You need to be going over to that ranch. So, that had sort of... that was actually towards the end of them sort of closing the net on Stewart anyway.
Ugh. The sad thing as well, Sanford is obviously trapped. Because what happens is Stewart dictates letters to him. He says, right, you need to write home. This is what you're going to write. Make sure you tell them you're having a good time at school. Tell them this is how kind I am. He makes him say, oh, my uncle's so wonderful. I'm having a great time at school. He's trapped. The kid's trapped. Stewart starts travelling around quite a lot, though, so at least Sanford has a bit of time on his own, and he's like, oh, thank God, at least there's a couple of days where I'm not being battered or abused. And then something happens at the end of August 1927. There's a failed abduction of Junior Thompson. This is a family who are walking around Pickering Park, which sounds charming. Junior wanders off, as kids do, and a man came up to him and said, and starts chatting to him. The man is Stewart. And he thinks, oh, this man's quite pleasant. And then the man says, do you want to tickle me? So Junior thinks, this guy's weird. He goes to walk off, and Stewart pulls the old, I've got some dogs in my van. Do you want to see them? And Junior's like, yeah. Now then he grabs Junior, and Junior screams and fought and managed to get free. Junior's father, Senior, I imagine, finds Stewart, and he pulls a penknife on him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Ooh, what are you going to do? Whittle me down?
But it's quite a 1920s thing, isn't it, to have to just have a penknife on you?
Yeah,
I love
very 1920s thing to do.
Although my partner carries a penknife.
Oh, does it? But it's a Swiss Army knife.
Yes, because you can't have a blade that fixes. But in Edinburgh, he's got like 3 knives that he uses on the farm, and he bought his. Because he went up to the fringe, he brought his non-fixing knife. And
did he have any use for it?
Well, it's. This is the thing: is you make it sound like everyone who's carrying a knife is sort of like a threat to society. Genuinely, he's just opening parcels of things I bought with sequins on off eBay. That's the main manly thing that he does. With his
I guess
knife.
It's a nice thing to do, nice thing to have.
Yes.
You enjoy your penknife, love. Good for you. So all this goes on. And then it takes a terrible turn, as if it's not bad enough. On February the 1st, Stewart has been off on one of his, disappearing acts. And he comes back, and Sanford is like, oh, God, he's in a good mood. Something bad's happened. He's laughing, he's joking. He says, hey, Sanford, come and look at this. And he has a bucket. Sanford looks inside, and what he initially thinks are animal entrails, he realises are actually a human head. Now, Stewart is laughing at this, and obviously Sanford's vomiting at this point. He says, oh, this is a person, this is a bloke or boy that I murdered in self-defence. I shot him, and I've decapitated him. The rest of his body's in the car. We need to get rid of the head and the body. And he makes Sanford start a fire. They burn the head and they smash the bones to bits. They get in the car and they stop and throw the body into a ditch. Sanford, at this point, is terrified, as you would be.
Yeah.
It's vile.
It's really horrible.
They never found out who the victim was either.
No, they just know that the kid was Mexican because, so he was told to burn the head. He made him build the fire and then smash up the fragments of bone. And then they took the body and dumped it on the side of a road on the way to go to Stuart's parents' house because Stewart wanted his parents to provide an alibi. And he'd be like, oh, no, we were here that day. So, it's they just know it was a Mexican boy. And they think that his parents hadn't reported him missing because they were in the country illegally, which is it's just so sad, isn't it, when people sort of, and that will still happen today, where people die scared to speak up about, or are never found because of the precarious nature of being like, an illegal immigrant or, being in the country and in a non-official capacity.
The insane thing is, they go to visit Stuart's parents, obviously Sanford's grandparents. Stewart tells Louise, his mother, what he's done. He says, I killed this lad, it was in self-defence. Louise, of course, says, none of this is your fault, you beautiful, wonderful boy.
Well, actually, what happens is Sanford starts to tell them, and is like, as soon as Stewart leaves the room, he's like, this happened. And then Louise goes and says to Stewart, what happened? And he said, oh, it was self-defence. And she was like, I'm so sorry I had to go through that. And does them all coffee cake.
Fucking hell.
Which teaches Sanford, even if you say, and he says, yeah, I did kill them, nothing happens.
Oh, God, it's horrible, isn't it? It's horrible. Oh, God. On March 10th, 1928, Walter, the young boy, Walter Collins, that we heard about before, he offers Walter a ride in his convertible. As they're driving out of the town, I think it's quite obvious that Walter's like, hang on a minute, why are we going towards this chicken farm? He drives him, poor Walter, to the chicken farm. Sanford sees him arrive and he's like, oh no. He hears Stewart assaulting the poor boy. He just has to put a pillow over his head. The thing is, obviously Sanford's like, oh, this is awful, but at least when he's here, he's leaving me alone. But also I want to help this boy get away because this is not going to end well. Louise shows up out of the blue, and obviously Sanford's maybe thinking, oh, thank God, she's here now, she'll see what's happening and rescue me. It doesn't happen. She asks where Stewart is. Sanford says he's in the hen house. She goes over, shoves past him, opens the door. Obviously she sees Walter in there. Stewart's crying and he says, oh, if Walter vanishes, I promise I'll never do this again. So Louise, this is insane, isn't it? Yeah. Louise says, right, we're all going to kill Walter, so we all can't talk. So poor Walter is asleep in the hen house. Stewart gets an axe, and it's horrible. I don't even know how to put this. They hit him in the head with the axe, and they force Sanford to do that, so he's involved, and they make Sanford dig a grave for the boy as well.
Yeah. Ugh. Fucking awful. This is where Louise, I mean, it happened with the previous one as well. This is where Louise stops being sort of, woman who's supportive of child and starts being complicit for me.
Yeah. It's horrendous. It's horrible. I mean, I think she must have known about other stuff as well in the past.
Yes.
She must have known about this.
There's no way this is the first of anything for a start.
Absolutely not.
Now, is this Walter?
Yeah, Walter is reported missing. It's in all the papers, eventually.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Walter now. It's a very high-profile missing persons case. There's been lots of sightings of Walter in San Francisco, and then in Glendale, California, a petrol station attendant says, I saw him. He was in the back of a car, His head was poking out, but his body was wrapped in newspaper from the neck down.
What?
Yeah, I know. Which we know it isn't him, because it was at a time when Walter was already dead, which means there was another boy wrapped in newspaper in the back of a fucking car. He goes missing, and then in August, a couple of months later, the LAPD find him. Now, this is a massive relief for them, because at the time the LAPD have a particularly bad reputation because of a case that happened on their watch. So it was a 12-year-old called Marion Parker. She was abducted from school by a guy saying it was her dad, or that her dad wasn't ill and he was picking her up from school. Then this family gets sent a ransom note written in this gold lettering. It said,
nice touch.
Yes, it was. He referred to himself as Fate at some point. He sent a load of telegrams and a load of letters. Fate at one point, Fox at the other. And he basically says, listen, I want you to pay me, I think it was like 1.5k, which is equivalent to about 23k today. So he says, and I'll give you your daughter back. But the reason he calls himself the Fox is that he's like, I'm a wily one, you can't catch me. So they go to meet up, and the police follow them too, obviously, and so he never turns up. The kidnapper is like, you brought the police with you, that wasn't part of the agreement. So the police is like, you know what, just meet him anyway, and we'll don't worry about it, we'll catch him. There'll be no issue. So this guy who just works in a bank, Perry, his name is Perry Parker, goes to meet the kidnapper with all the money. Now, Perry has made a list of all the serial numbers of the banknotes, so they can be traced. The guy pulls up, he's got a bandana over his face, and then he looks in the car, and Perry can see his daughter's there, and she's not moving, but her eyes are open, so he's like, oh, she's been drugged. So he hands over the money. The guy's got a sawn-off shotgun pointing at him, and then he goes, here's your daughter, opens the door and shoves her out, and as he shoves her out, you can see that she's got no limbs. She's been disemboweled.
Oh, my God.
A man's shirt and a towel stuffed inside her, and her eyes are held open with piano wires.
What the fuck is this?
Mad, isn't it?
This is one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life.
It's horrible.
I didn't know about this. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, sorry, I should have given you a trigger warning.
Fucking hell.
The police find her limbs the next day in Elysian Park. She'd been dead for 12 hours. Now, they didn't trace the notes at first. They traced a laundry mark on the towel that was stuffed inside her. And it went back to Bellevue Apartments. And this is where they found William Hickman. So he's a 19-year-old who worked at the same bank as a junior cashier as Perry. And in fact, Perry was an officer, and he basically got him sacked because he was stealing money. I think he tried to steal like $400. And so William had been in prison for a bit and then on parole and basically exacted his revenge. So there's a massive manhunt now for William. And he was eventually arrested on the 22nd of December 1927 in Oregon because they recognised the pictures of him.
Home of Nike.
Yeah, yes. And that's such a funny thing to say. So he goes on trial, is found guilty. He tries to say that he's possessed by a god or a deity, but they're like, yeah, fuck off, mate. And he goes to San Quentin and he's hung on October 1928. So this was an incredibly high-profile case. So the LAPD, everyone thought was shit at their jobs, had allowed a little girl to be murdered with their bad advice, had then allowed this guy to go on a manhunt. So they were really up against it. So what happens is they suddenly find Walter. And they said, we found Walter. This is so bad. And so Christine goes, great, and starts writing to him. And then they said, okay, well, you need to pay for him to come to LA because he was in, I think he was in Iowa. So they were like, well, you need to pay for him to come and be reunited with it. So she goes, okay. He turns up and the first thing she says is, I do not think that is my son.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. And the police were like, oh, he looks different because he's been abducted and he's, he's got like shallow cheeks and things like that. And that's why he looks different. All kids look different when they've been abducted.
Oh, okay.
And then there was a police officer called J.J. Jones who says, why don't you take him home and try the boy out? That's what he said. That was the advice. So she comes back after... She keeps contacting them being like, this isn't my son. And they're like,
I can't believe this actually happened.
It gets worse, right? So the film The Changeling is based on this. So she comes back in 3 weeks' time because the police are sort of ignoring her. And she goes, here are his dental records. They don't match this child. Here are all my friends. They're all witnesses. That is not my child. And then this guy, JJ Jones, says... This is an exact quote. He says, what are you trying to do? Make fools out of us all? Or are you trying to shirk your duty as a mother and have the state provide for your son? You're the most cruel-hearted woman I have ever known. And then he gets her committed to a psychiatric ward for 5 days for lying that this was her son. Now, when she's released, Walter, fake Walter, confesses. He says, no, my name's Billy Fields. I'm not Walter. Now, he wasn't Billy Fields. He was actually a kid called Arthur Hutchins Jr., who was from Iowa, 12 years old, had a criminal record already, and he'd been spotted in a diner, and people said, are you Walter?
Who's this little shit?
Well, this is the thing. He'd been minding his own business. He lived with his stepmom. He hated her, and then they went, you like that kid who's missing from Hollywood? And he went, Hollywood? And he thought he'd get to escape his stepmom, and he'd become an actor. So he just plays along. And then he's got all these letters from Christine with information in there. The police were feeding him information about, what Walter would know. And so he just plays along. So it's so... And this is the thing. They said, why did you do it? And he said, she was nice to me and it's fun to be somebody that you aren't.
Oh, okay.
Now, this is the fucking kicker for me. Christine takes JJ Jones, the officer, to court. He was ordered to pay, at the time, $10,800, which is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. He never pays. He just never bothers. So she didn't get her money. She had to go through court. She has a missing child. She was forced to have another child and be told that was her son. And because there was no body found for Walter, she always believed that he was still alive and kept looking for him for the whole of her life until she died at the age of 75 in 1964.
Fucking hell, what a miserable life.
Isn't it absolute shit?
Oh, God. Miserable. Thoroughly.
And it's just unbelievable that she can be like, that's not my son, and then be like, no, just see if it is, and then be like, you're a crazy bitch and you're a bad mum. Oh, God, it's
Try
so dark.
the boy out. Very soon after this, 2 months after Walter's murder, May the 16th, 1928, Lewis and Nelson Winslow, who were aged 10 and 12, a very wholesome day they'd had. They'd been at a local club learning how to make model boats. Very sweet, that, isn't it?
Really lovely.
They'd almost stayed home as well. Their mum was poorly, so they said, oh, no, we'll stay here with you. She says, no, you go make your model boat. She'd been looking forward to this all week, I imagine. And they bump into Stuart, and he says, do you want to come and see my ranch? And they say yes. So they get in the car with him, and Sanford is thinking, they arrive at the ranch, and...
It's 2 hours away.
Yeah.
They must have been like, I wish we hadn't said yes now, because we have been travelling for 90 minutes.
It's America, though, isn't it? Everywhere's miles away. It's nothing to them, is it? It's nothing to them. Although I think, because we travel quite a lot, have I told you one of my pet hates, and it's completely unreasonable. I will say this. You get on a train, and it's like, this is an hour-long journey, which again, is nothing to us. An hour journey on a train flies by to me because I'm so used to doing them. When I see people getting out snacks and things on it, I'm like, what, are you going to fucking die in an hour if you don't have some chipsticks, are you? Like, oh, you got your little Marks and Spencer's sausage rolls in a tub, have you?
Okay, that's me, and it's because I'm like, right, I can eat on the train and then I've got to work as soon as I get there. I'm grabbing the only downtime I have to have my Marks and Spencer's sausage rolls, actually, Rachel.
The thing is, I know this is unreasonable. I know. I know, but I still think it. Every time it happens, I'll see a family that's on the train and it's like, oh, it's an hour and 20 minutes, this journey. And here's your Scotch egg. Oh, has anyone got the Percy pigs? I'm like, you are the pigs in this scenario. And I know this is unreasonable. I know it is. There is absolutely nothing wrong with people doing that. Yet every time I think it. Totally unreasonable.
That's so funny.
Anyway, I don't even know how I got onto that. Yeah, so this is it. They're travelling to the ranch. Now, Sanford sees them arrive and he's like, oh, no. But he also sees that they're very smartly dressed. clearly middle-class boys, and he thinks somebody will be looking for these boys. I really hope that they he hopes they get found, and in turn, obviously, he will be rescued. Now, Stewart obviously thinks the same. He thinks, oh, maybe I shouldn't have abducted these two because they're definitely going to be looked for. So 3 days into him keeping them hostage, he makes them write a letter to say that they've run away to Mexico. Now, he hoped this would divert attention. But the police are actually looking for them as well at this point. Sanford was in charge of looking after the boys. He had to change their bedding, give them food, empty the chamber pots. He was never with them long enough on his own to be able to say, right, we need to get out of here, because Stewart was always around. Sanford he was very kind to the boys. He gave them little bits of spare wood so they could do drawings to pass the time. So sad, isn't it?
It's really sad, that poor kid. Well, all the kids in this are really sad.
It's just really horrible. This was, they were there a week and a half, and Sanford was like, there's nothing I can do to help these boys. I know what's going to happen. He was then, obviously Stewart thinks, well, I've had enough of these lads. I need to get rid of them. People are looking for them. He then forced Sanford again to help with murdering the two boys. Sanford distracted Nelson as Stewart then axed him to death. And then he made Sanford hit Lewis. All of this is awful, and I hate this. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard. Sanford said that he had to dig a grave for the two boys, and when Stewart put them in the grave, they were still making noise. They weren't quite dead.
Yeah.
I hate this. I hate everything about this. I cannot believe that my boyfriend has suggested that we do this as an episode.
Yeah, it says an awful lot about him.
Absolutely furious. I think this is genuinely one of the worst things that I've ever heard about. It's horrible.
It's horrible.
Those poor boys. Stewart is getting a bit confident now, because he's done a few successful murders, hasn't he? And he's like, do you know what? I've had a great idea. I'm going to kidnap and enslave an entire family. Can you imagine anything worse?
Straight away he goes to the Salvation Army. And he goes there and he goes, hey, I want to help. And they're like, amazing. And he went, yeah, I want to help with kids.
Yeah, sorry. Anyone who goes in anywhere and states that, just put them in prison.
Is it bad that I think it's fine if it's a woman?
Yeah, okay, any man that does that. If any man says, I really want to work with the kids, straight to jail, do not pass go. Do not collect your £200. Get in there.
So he finds this family who are really sort of destitute because the dad has fallen on ill health and lost his job. So they're in a really difficult position. They're called the Dolls, right?
Yeah, really weird surname.
He goes, listen, I thought you could come and live on this chicken ranch. There's a bit of work to do, but, you'd be helped out by a kid who works there. It wouldn't be very labour intensive. You could all chip in and I'll just give you free accommodation and I'll make sure you've got food. And they were like, oh, this is sort of too good to be true. And they didn't believe it. And he went, why don't you come and see the farm? You can see what it's about. So they go and visit the ranch, don't they?
Yes, they go. And Louise is there. There's so much travel in this. Imagine everyone's travelling around all the time. Louise is there. Stewart introduces his own mother as Mrs. Mayo and introduces Sanford as her son, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
Sanford gets sent off to the chicken coop while all this is happening. And what happens is he obviously thinks, do you know what? I have bitten off more than I can chew here. This is too much. I have to take this family away. So Sanford's looking from the chicken coop and he sees the family being driven off the property.
He's in this weird bit where he really doesn't want them to come because he's scared they're going to get murdered.
Yeah.
But also he's like, but this might be my only chance of escape. There'll be more of us. Maybe we could overpower Stewart. And he actually takes Stewart aside at one point and he says, he was more worried for the family. Even though that was his chance of escape, he said, listen, if you do this, what happens if the dad is strong and builds up his strength and what if he attacks you? Like, this is a bad idea to Stewart. And Stewart's like, shut the fuck up. But does change his mind and does tell them to leave. So Sanford saves the life of that family potentially, but also with it leaves his chance of escaping.
I actually do think Stewart obviously realises, like, I cannot keep this family because he 100% could have been overpowered by them, couldn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
God, I wish he had have been. So this is it. The family are gone. They've escaped a murderer. And then in August 1928, he turns his attention back to young boys again. There's a 15-year-old boy, Stephen Neil Black. Stuart, at this point, is a regular customer at the Global Super Service. He does it again. He grooms a family. He becomes friendly with the boy's dad. He's, spending time with this boy's family. Sanford is like, thank God, in a way, that he's got this new fixation. He's leaving me alone.
Yeah, because he's now suddenly never on the ranch. So Sanford's like, well, at least he's not here beating me and raping me.
Yes.
And that's so sad to be like, he must have found another victim. That at least gives me what that must do to you psychologically is appalling.
Horrendous. Bear in mind, this is still a teenage boy.
Yeah, he's a kid.
This is a child. This is still not an adult man. He's about 14 at this point. What happens, though? A surprise visitor in August turns up on the ranch. Jessie, Sanford's sister, arrives. She has suspected something is wrong because the letters that are coming back, that are being delivered to her and the family home, the writing is appalling. There's been no improvement. So she's like, Sanford clearly is not in school. She arrives and he's like, oh, I'm so happy that my sister's here. But then at the same time, he's like, oh God, but what if he kills my sister? She's not seen him for 2 years at this point. Sanford is emaciated, he's covered in bruises, he's scared, he's nervous, he's on edge. And she knows at this point that she was right and that something was wrong.
Yeah. So also when she saw him, she was like, bearing in mind he was like 13 when he left and he's 15. And what our boys at that age pretty famous for, other than masturbating, it's growing.
Yeah.
And he hadn't grown an inch.
Wow.
Because he was so malnourished and so overworked and probably losing his mind with the extreme stress of that situation. So she was really shocked when she saw him.
Horrible. Stuart, though, he thinks, oh God, well, she's here. I can't kill her. So what I have to do is what anyone would do in this situation. He takes them sightseeing.
The fucking
He
hell.
gets them in the car. And at least he's with them. He's like, well, if I have both of them with me, then they can't tell anyone anything or they can't discuss anything that's been going on. Sanford's staying in a motel room with him as well. So he's never got a moment to himself. However, when they're in a motel room, Jessie leaves her room, creeps into the room that Sanford is sharing with Stuart, and creeps under the covers and says to Sanford, tell me what's been happening. Which is insane.
Yeah. And so while he's sleeping there next to them, he's basically, and for the first few nights he wouldn't say anything. He was too scared because he thought it would mean that she would get killed as well. But he eventually sort of like whispers under his breath over the course of a couple of nights what has been happening to him. And obviously his sister's fucking horrified, but she's also skint. So she doesn't know how they are going to escape.
Mm-hmm. She manages to get a ticket to get him back to get a boat to get back to Canada. Now, she thinks she's got the money, she hasn't got enough. So what she does is she takes a massive chance and contacts Stuart's father, George. He agrees to help. They're pretty stunned by this. They're like, great, we can get the next ferry out of here. She goes to the coast, so Stuart thinks, oh good, she's gone. I don't have to worry anymore. Mm-hmm. The next morning, George quietly arrives at the ranch. Mm-hmm. He gets Sanford in the car. They leave. And of course he's like, oh my God, thank God, I'm away, I'm free. And then, a bit further up the road, what does he spot in the rearview mirror? Stuart's car. What does George do? The utter pig. He takes Sanford back to the farm.
He goes on to say years later, the father says, I was scared out of my mind by Stuart, and he was like, and I think if his mother would only admit it, she would admit that she was scared of him too. So that's what he said. He said he was basically scared of him. But I just think he had the chance to do the right thing there. And his poor sister is waiting for him at the dock.
She waits and waits and waits. And eventually
the bus that he's meant to be on doesn't turn up. Like, it turns up and he's not on it, and she's like, he must be getting there another way. But it gets really... They almost leave without her.
Yeah, so the people who work on the boat are like, you have to get on this, we're leaving. So she's like, right, okay. She's upset, she's angry, she's worried. But while she's on the boat back to Canada, she's got a new plan. She gets off the boat and she goes to the American consulate in Vancouver and reports everything she knows about Stewart.
But she also says he's there illegally as an immigrant because she knows that madly will expedite things. So what they basically get him on, it's a bit like Al Capone and the taxes, is that they're like, they can move in a swifter fashion if they think that he's an illegal immigrant working in the country.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. So immediately they sort of dispatch. It moves quite quickly after this because she was like, we don't have the money to bring him home, but if we can get him extradited, then he will come home. And that's just such a dark, desperate situation to be in. So that's it. They go to the farm, but Stuart's clocked on that she's going to come back and she's going to tell everyone everything. So he starts packing down the farm, doesn't he?
Yeah. Sanford, though, notices, hang on, he's packing all his stuff. There's none of my stuff in this car. Oh, he's making me sell some of my things. I'm not going, am I?
And when they're packing the car up, he was filling the front passenger seat. So he's like, right, well, I'm obviously not going to go.
What?
And he just thought he's going to murder me.
He's evil. What an evil man.
Yeah.
So Sanford realises this. Then, on the 30th of August 1928, the police in Los Angeles get a telegram from the Canadian authorities. And they tell them what's happened. And they're like, you've got to go and search this ranch. So they're like, okay. They go to the ranch, they look, there's nobody around, they're having a look around, they go into the hen house. Sanford was in there. They approach him, they think this kid's dead, but he wasn't dead because he started to cry. He was rushed to hospital, he was starving to death, he was skin and bones at this point. It took him 3 weeks to recover and get his strength back, and then he was able to tell them where the bodies on the farm were buried.
Yeah, they thought he was dead when they saw him like a pile in the corner.
Poor Sanford.
So when Stuart's caught, they're basically fleeing to Canada, which is obviously very scary knowing that Sanford lives there. And they're travelling there in sort of disguise together. It's his mum and Stuart. So Sarah and Stuart are travelling. And apparently Stuart was like, I'm going to fucking murder her soon. Like, I'm so sick of her shit. Even though she's facilitated him, she's paid for everything, she's covered for him, she's literally getting away with murder for him. And he's like, my mum is so annoying. So he would just wanted to get to the border because at the border they were having to go in different directions and never see each other again to keep each other safe. And she was like, I'll never see you again, but it's worth it to keep you alive. And he's like, I cannot fucking wait to get to that border. I'm sick of your shit. But he never manages to get there because they get arrested before that.
Good. So, January, the following year, he's on trial for these murders. He acts as his own attorney. Of course he does. He calls his parents as witnesses. This is where Louise confesses to killing Walter and he's sentenced to life in prison. Good. The 8th of February, after 3 hours deliberation, which there's a bit of pissing about in there as well, isn't there? There's a couple of sandwiches eaten, a couple of ciggies been smoked. That he's found guilty and he's sentenced to death and he is hanged. He plays... This is weird. So Filla, Claude's brother, who he was obsessed with, he is still obsessed with him. He actually plays his favourite Song of Songs, before his execution. He's only 24 years old at this point. Now, I do not agree with capital punishment in any way, shape or form. However, he was so terrified when he was going to the gallows. He was shaking, crying, begging for his life. And do you know what? I can't help but think, good.
He said, a prayer, please say a prayer for me.
No.
Yeah, it's awful. And you know what? I think if it wasn't for Sanford being alive and being such a reliable witness, because there was so few remains left because of the quicklime, I think they only found, what was it, an ankle bone and a couple of fingers and some blood-soaked earth. That was all that was
exactly
left.
That sounds like something they would serve in a posh restaurant and you would pretend to enjoy it. That sounds awful.
Yeah, because of all that he did, it's the old, what is it, corpus absentium?
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
He would have, I think, possibly got away with it. Now, the 27-day trial obviously ends in his execution. So his mum is sentenced to life imprisonment on New Year's Eve, which I think is such a fucking weird time to do it. December 31st, 1928. Now, the reason she didn't get
Anything planned
executed
for the year ahead?
yeah, 10, 9. This is when she starts coming out with mad shit, by the way. They both do in prison. This is when she says, oh, he's the product of incest and it was an English nobleman. The only reason she wasn't executed is because she was a woman, and they typically shied away from doing that. Now, once he's in prison, starts confessing to all sorts. And in fact, he used to say, I'm completely innocent, and then he used to give sort of very detailed confessions to murders. And he said 18, 19, maybe even 20 victims. But he just loved the attention, good or bad, that came his way. And he would do this, he'd go, I'll tell you where the victims are. And so they'd bring him out of prison, and then he'd go, I've forgotten, actually.
Oh.
But he just kept doing it again and again and again. And he said, just in the sort of week before he's being executed, he said, I'm going to tell Christine Collins where Walter's body is. So she comes in, she's like, I don't want to talk to him. And they were like, well, this is probably the only way you're going to find out where your son is. And she goes, okay, fine. And then she goes in and he just turns away and refuses to talk to her.
Oh my God, I hate him.
Yeah,
I hate him.
He's horrible. And you know that kid who pretended to be her son?
Yeah.
Arthur J. Hitchens. He then sort of left, and he went on to work at a carnival, selling like tickets, and then he would move back to California as a horse trainer and a jockey. And he died in 1954, and he had a wife and a kid, and his kid Carol said, oh, my dad was full of adventure. In my mind, he could do no wrong. And it's like, you fucking what, mate?
Yeah, okay. Well, fine. Okay, Carol.
There's just so much horrible crime around, and what happened to Christine Collins was so awful. And the fact that I'm always fascinated where like true crime cases have an impact on each other, you know. So like that poor girl getting kidnapped, Marnie Parker, meant that Christine Collins ended up in an asylum. You know, like there's an action consequence there. I'm just fascinated by where this stuff intersects, because also that Marnie Parker, that poor little girl who was murdered in such a horrible way. There's been loads of like what they called murder ballads written about her. You know, there was sort of a fashion at the time in like the 30s and 40s to write these tragic songs about people who'd been murdered, which I think is fucking bizarre.
A lot going on in California at this time in history as well, murder-wise, isn't there? It's a very violent time.
I'd say 20s through till 40s is really sort of... It's really, because up until sort of the Black Dahlia, really, is like really... It's just Hollywood. There's lots of transient people moving through it, lots of mad people.
it's just awful.
Yeah.
Good news is, though, Sanford, he is not... obviously, the boy is a victim, very much so. He's sent to a school for boys after all this, which sounds like it's going to be bad. But it actually was an institution that helped with his trauma. Yeah. So he was actually given a help afterwards.
It's a rehab place, basically, for traumatised young men. And because as soon as I read the name of it, I was like, oh, okay. And then he was abused by someone there. But it did him the world of good, which is so brilliant.
He moved back to Canada. He got married. He served honourably in World War II. Can I just stress, I just think after everything that Sanford went through, he should have been like, you don't have to do this. Like, you're exempt from this.
Yeah, this is like being on your period in PE.
Yeah, like
you had to bury boys while you were still a boy. Do you know what? You don't have to go and fight in the trenches.
You're not allowed to join the army. You don't have to do anything. You put your feet up, Sanford. He had children. Now, he didn't have biological children. He had adopted children, and the reason for this was because he said he was so terrified of passing on the genetics from his family. He was so scared that another Stewart may happen.
Fucking hell.
Sad that. Now, Sanford never mentioned what had happened to him until his children were quite a bit older. Now, his son Jerry wrote a book about it. And he said that it was one night, he'd never mentioned it to him before. They were on a long car journey. You know, it's like when you run out of conversation. And you're like, did I ever tell you about the time? So he tells his son. His son is obviously shocked and upset that his father went through all this. He writes a book about it. So it's nice to know that Sanford had a happier life later on. Now, Sanford died on June the 20th, 1991, aged 78. So he lived to a good age, and he had a happier life later on. And I'm glad about that.
Yeah, what an incredible testament to like the resolve of a person, that they could go through all of that and still come out the other side being a nice, sympathetic, great dad.
Yeah, good for Sanford.
Yes, led an exemplary life is often said about him.
What a horrible episode.
Yeah.
I hate this, and I never want... I'm glad we've done it, though, and I think it's one of the worst. I think it's horrible.
If you want to read his book, it's called The Road Out of Hell, Sanford Clarke and the True Story of the Wineville Murders. So there you go.
Interesting. I don't think I want to read it.
No, absolutely not. Yeah,
this has been enough,
not.
Thank you. This is enough for me. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
May I mention, I am doing my show in London and Manchester. Can I Be Awful? Is coming to 21 Soho on the 29th and 30th of September and 1st of October. Tickets are on sale. And if you want to see me at the Frog and Bucket on the 9th of October, which is a 5 p.m. show, be quick because it's going to sell out. Tickets, you know how to use the internet. Please come and see me. That would be nice.
I'm also on tour. Our Halloween show sold out. We're thinking about putting another little secret show on of a project that we're going to be trying. So that'll go out to our mailing list first. And you guys have also been helping us design some new merch for Christmas, for giving us suggestions about things that you want. So that's on the Facebook page. But yes, I'm still on tour until November. Dates that are really busy: Bristol, Brighton, London. Some have sold out already as well. So, yes, it would be lovely to see you there.
Also, Halloween show coming up. The lucky legends that have tickets. Fancy dress, please. This is... Someone asked me, actually, a question. They said, what's the best fancy dress you've seen at a live show? We've never done fancy dress before.
Never done it before, no. So I can't wait.
We decided we're going to have prizes.
Yes.
There's going to be a prize for the best costume. So I'm excited about this. So
it's a vial of each of our genetic matter to do with what you want.
So yeah, have a think about what you're going to come to the Halloween show. As streaming will be announced soon, no doubt, and it's going to be fun. Can't wait.
Yeah, and we're working on a Christmas show. We just don't know if we can make it happen. If we can't make it happen before Christmas, we might do a fake Christmas show in January, which Rachel hates.
Which I will hate. I honestly, the thought of it.
Get it done.
Yeah, get that fucking tree down. 6 o'clock on the 25th of December. Get it back in the loft. Turn the Christmas
That's what we should
off.
do. We should do baubles with "Get that fucking tree down."
Get that fucking tree down. Cannot stand it. But that's good.
Let us know if you would buy a bauble with "Get that fucking tree down."
Do you know what? I will buy a bauble. I demand this is made. But that's it. That's all good. Thank you to everyone who donates to the Patreon, keeping us ad-free. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is quite a long one. We hope that's all right with you guys.
Yeah.
And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.